Hey guys, Jim here from Budget RC, and this is the third video in our Redcat Gen 7 upgrade series. In this one, we're going to be tackling the steering. And I think this one's going to be a pretty valuable video because based on my own experiences and what I've been reading on the forums and on the different groups, the biggest complaint that most people seem to have with this vehicle is the steering, or actually the lack of steering. In its stock form, this thing doesn't really steer a whole lot. The steering angle is pretty poor. So what I'm going to do is take you through a series of different upgrades that you can do to help make this vehicle steer better. And depending on how far you want to take it, you'll get some ideas to go each step of the way. And the net result by the time we're done with this is that you're going to take this vehicle from a poor steering vehicle to a pretty good steering vehicle. So stick around, I think you'll learn something. Okay, so I've got the vehicle upside down here just to give you a little bit of perspective. And you can see this is my total steering angle, which is not very good. We have a couple of things that are preventing us from having better steering. What I'm going to do now is zoom in a little bit so that you can get a better view. Okay, so there's two things here that are preventing this from steering more. The first is that built into the knuckles right here is a stop. And when I turn that knuckle, you're going to see it right here. Let me move this in the frame. When I turn that knuckle, you can see right here it contacts the screw that holds the C-hub in place. So the first thing we're going to do is grind these away on both sides. So the other area that we run into trouble is right here between the drag link and the differential housing. I've seen some guys notch the differential housing to make more room for the drag link. I don't want to do that because it's risky. If you go a little bit too far, you've got big problems. Another thing I've seen people do is take the drag link and throw either one bend in the middle or a couple bends out near the edges, and then use some spacers between the drag link and the end links just to keep the steering geometry the same. Lastly, what I've seen people do are just used end links that are angled. And this is the approach that I'm going to try first because I've already got some end links on a parts tree from my bomber build. And a lot of people have these sorts of parts hanging around, so I think it's a nice easy way to do it without having to spend any money. If you do need to buy some, there are some out there that you can get affordably. RC 4-wheel drive has some, Axial has them, and they don't cost a lot of money. Another alternative is to do like I had mentioned and bend this, but in doing that you will need a couple of spacers to maintain your geometry. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to see what kind of an effect this will have. Okay, so once you get the wheels off the truck, you've got good access. You can take the screws out, upper and lower, that hold the knuckles to the C-hubs. And then there's a screw with a nut holding each end of the tie rod on. Once you do that, everything will come right apart. And now you can get to these to trim them. So here's the before and after. You can see right there, we've got that stop right there. And then once you grind that off, you get a lot more clearance. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other one, and then we'll move to the tie rod. So the first thing I did here was to throw a couple of countersink screws into here. That way we can set it flat and measure. And I measured 5 and 15/32 of an inch. So that's going to be our baseline so that we can make sure that we get the same dimension. Okay, so these are the original links that came off, and rather than use the offset axial links, which I found out are an M4 instead of an M3, I've got these links from RC 4-wheel drive that are offset in the opposite direction. But we're going to give this a try because what this will do, once we install these, it's going to lift the whole tie rod up higher, which should get it away from the middle of the differential and give us more clearance. So we're going to go ahead and move forward with this and see how it works. Okay, so I've got the new ends trimmed up, and we've got exactly the same length that we had before. Now you can see, looking at the side, that this is going to be able to move the rod up a little bit once it's installed. Not only should that give me more clearance for my steering, but it'll lift the rod up a little bit out of the way of obstacles too. So I think this is going to be a pretty good option so long as it gives me adequate clearance. So let's reinstall now and see what we've managed to gain. Okay, so we've got this installed, and not everything's fully installed yet, but we've got our knuckles trimmed, and I've got those offset links that are lifting up this bar, although now that the vehicle's upside down that may be difficult to see. But now if we extend our steering all the way, going in this direction, I actually run out of throw
on the steering well before this hit, and I think it's because the dog bones are binding. Going this way, we've got a lot of the same thing. You can still see we've got some clearance here, but if I turn the dog bones a little bit, now we can go a little bit further. So I think now the dog bones, and you can see here I've got all the way till I'm touching, and this rod is just touching the differential housing at the same time. So that's going to work for this. Right now I think my dog bones are the limiting factor. I think in order to make this a little bit better, what we're going to need to do is go ahead and either bend this link so that I can get it further away from the differential and use a standard end link, but a little bit longer so that we can maintain the same overall distance, and go ahead and upgrade to the CVA axles instead of these dog bones. And I think that combination together is going to allow me to have some additional steering. So we're going to go ahead and start that part of the process now and see how it works out. Alright guys, so I've got this put back together, at least somewhat. I've got the CVAs in here, and what I noticed is that gives enough steering angle that I can turn this all the way to here. Now notice I don't have that screw in yet. That screw would normally stop you. So you can go even further here, and you've still got the ability for everything to turn, and it turns nice and freely. So because of that, what I'm going to try to do next, even though there's not a lot of material here, I want to try to countersink this hole here and run a countersunk screw in instead of the screw that came out of here. Okay guys, so just like I did with the skid, I countersunk these screws that are holding the C-hubs on. On the back side I just left them like they were, but you can see the difference. These are countersunk, and this allows this to come way in and should help give a little bit more steering. Even with it all the way in, everything still works nice and smooth. So now we're going to go ahead and put things back together and see how it worked out. Hey guys, so here's what I ended up doing. I used the offset RC four-wheel drive links, and you can see that they're offset vertically and not horizontally, so it doesn't move the tie rod out farther, it moves it up higher, which I think helps get it out of the way of junk too. And I got more steering out of that, but I didn't get quite as much as I wanted, so I also added a couple of small spacers here that moved it up a little bit higher. But what it did was it interfered with the link coming from the steering servo, so I had to use an offset link on the steering servo as well. So I used another one of those RC four-wheel drive links, and by doing this it gave me enough room here that I could still get my nut on, and now I have a lot more steering. One more thing to show, that I also put the screw up in from the bottom, and I did that just because I think this is less likely to get hung up on stuff than that nut and the screw sticking down. Even though they're real close to the tire, it could happen. So I just did it this way to give myself a little bit more room. And now you can see with those links up higher, and I've got my countersunk screws here and the CVAs, I can go all the way to here and I still have smooth steering. Okay, and even though it's hard to see, there's just a hair of clearance here, so that's not going to be an issue. And if I go the other way, I'm actually starting to run out of steering servo. The servo doesn't want to really go any further, but I've still got room here and I've still got room here. So right now it looks like the steering arm, or the servo arm, is really the limiter in how far I can go this way. And to fix that, I'm going to either need to use a longer arm, or we'll use a longer rod here, and we'll compensate for it in the centering on the servo. That's something that we'll probably play with later. For now, I think I'm going to get this back in. Alright guys, so I've got everything back together, and for the most part the steering is much improved. The one issue I'm running into now is that I'm running out of throw on the servo, so we're going to need to address that separately. But if we go this way, you can see how much steering this has now. Quite a lot more than it had. I'm really close to touching the shock with the tire now. On the other side, it really runs out of throw. That's about as far as it gets, and you can see I've still got a good distance from the shock. So I'm going to have to play with the servo arm, probably use a longer one, but overall I think we're way better off than we were, and I'm real happy with how this steering turned out. Alright, so like I said before, we had more steering in one direction than the other. So what I did here was to replace this link that I had cut down to make even with the old one. I replaced it with a little bit longer link. and that way it puts the throw of the servo over a little bit. So now I have more even steering. The only real problem I seem to have now is that even with the dual rate maxed out on the controller, I don't have enough throw. So I think to overcome that, I would either need a different controller, or since I'm not going to change the controller, I need to try to find a longer arm. A longer arm will give me more throw. So that's going to be the next step, is to try to find a longer arm. But I'm going to zoom out real quick and show you what I've got for steering now. Alright, so this is the steering with the controller, and I've got my steering dual rate on the controller maxed out. And I don't know how well you can tell, but if you look right down in here, it's not quite all the way. If you go the other way, it's kind of the same thing. There's a little bit more room here. This doesn't really go any farther than if I hadn't used the countersunk screws. So in order to get this to go a little bit more, I either need more throw from the controller, or I need to do something with the servo arm. So we'll see what happens next. Alright, so this is the stock servo arm that I just took off of the vehicle, and you can see it's just a standard plastic arm. And this is the replacement arm. This is just a Hobby King arm. It was a couple of bucks, and you can find these on places like GearBest and Banggood for like $2 or $3. If you compare them, you can see that it's quite a lot longer. So this is going to be able to give me the extra throw that I need. So we're going to go ahead and put this on and see how it works now. Alright, so now we've got that new arm on. It looks like a little bit of a tight fit. It moves the steering link back a little bit closer to the differential, but there's still plenty of clearance. So now we'll do another overhead and we'll see how it looks. Alright, so now I've got that longer arm on, and we'll see how it goes. So now it looks like we've got steering all the way to those stops, which is great. Got the vehicle upside down just so you can get a better view of the knuckles and how they go all the way to those flush mounted screws. And even at full turn, we're a little bit choppy. So I think we're basically at the edge of what these CVAs can do. So I don't think we're really going to be able to get much more steering than that.
Okay guys, so you can see that we took a few steps to improve our steering, and through the entire process we really didn't spend much money. All we really had to spend money on, other than the servo, were a couple of links and the new servo arm. So our previous total was $234. On this upgrade we spent $750 for a full set of those RC four-wheel drive links, even though you're only going to need 3 of them. We spent $2.50 for the alloy steering arm, and we spent about $1 for the countersunk screws. So that brings this upgrade's total to $11. We add that to the $234 from the previous upgrades, and we're at a total of $245 right now. So for a vehicle that's still under $250, what you have is a vehicle that performs extremely well. Overall, after having driven this vehicle a little bit, I'm really happy with how the steering has improved. It still doesn't steer quite the way my Bomber steers, but it's come a long way from how it steered originally. Now, to be honest with you, right now I still have the factory servo on here. I'm going to be throwing the other one on here soon, but I really wanted to put this one through its paces. And I've got to be honest, I really don't mind this servo so far. It's not real strong and it's not real fast, but every time I ask it to turn the tires, it turns the tires. So far we haven't replaced it, although we will soon. But overall, much better steering, and I hope you guys give this a try. I think if you do this, you'll be a lot happier with your Redcat as well. So until next time, guys, hope this helps.